Hello everyone and welcome back to the Black Eagles podcast. This is going to be our first special episode of the upcoming new season. Change of scenery perhaps for many of us. After 4 years of Senol Günes, the good, the bad and the ugly are now behind us and we're looking forward to the future. And that's going to be with a new coach. As of now, it's not been confirmed yet who the new coach will be, but the main candidate seems to be Başakşehir's Abdullah Avci. And here to talk about Abdullah Avci with me is Bruno Bottaro. Bruno, welcome back to the show. We spoke last week also on Football Turca, and we already spoke a little bit about Abdullah Avci, of course, but you have, of course, a personal experience with the man.
Yeah, of course. Hello, everyone. And it would be really nice to talk about Abdullah Avci or Abdullah Avci, as it's called in Başakşehir, and as he will be called very soon in Beşiktaş, as reports are right, I hope.
So do you think that this is the logical step in his career? Is it time for him to take that next challenge?
Yeah, well, I think that as I heard in 2016 when I was in Istanbul, I heard something also about Beşiktaş and Abdullah Avci in 2010. There was already a chance at the time, but then Abci went to the national team. So this is probably the second time in which he could have gone to Beşiktaş. This is natural future for me in this moment in which he tried to win for Başakşehir. It didn't work out in the team. That group has passed its prime because now it's quite old and older than 2 years ago, and Başakşehir was really nice to watch. Now it's quite different. They had some troubles this season in spite of being first in the league for a while, well, for the most part of the whole season. Now he's ready for another challenge, and probably he wanted to leave Başakşehir with a title. He didn't manage to do that, so now it's time to focus on the future. And his future is Beşiktaş, and I hope he will be given enough time because this is very, very important for me.
Obviously, yeah, that's going to be essential for a man who's going to try and lay the groundwork first. But I think we've seen with this era of this leadership in Beşiktaş that a coach does get a certain amount of time. It's not like at Galatasaray where you get a couple of months, and if it's not all up to snuff, then, or even if you're in the first place like Igor Tudor was, and you still get sacked. So it's not like that at Beşiktaş, but obviously there's going to be a lot more pressure than there is at Başakşehir. There's going to be higher expectations to immediately deliver, but it is not the same. But for him, it's going to be his first real experience, if he comes, of course, at a big club with those sorts of pressures. Do you think that he has the tools necessary to cope with that?
Well, I think he's absolutely something different in the Turkish coaching landscape, for example. So he needs to have a chance, first of all, in such a club. He never had such a chance. He probably failed at the Turkish national team. And at the same time, he had a great stint in Başakşehir and also a previous stint at Istanbul Başakşehir, that was basically the same club. So he deserves a chance, in my opinion, because he is different. He's not of Fatih Terim. He's not of the whole school like Senol Günes. Something that I really want for Turkish football is to evolve in the next years. And Turkish football cannot evolve if it relies just on the old school. We are talking about a championship that has just been won by Fatih Terim and Galatasaray. It's the 8th title for Fatih Terim. And so we are talking about we have the same headlines that we had maybe 20 years ago on Turkish newspapers. Nothing has changed in Turkish football at the moment, tactically wise. So he is the only story at the moment. Probably we have other stories like Erol Bulut, like Okan Buruk, but he is the real one in the last years that has given something to Turkish football. So in my trust, in my vision, in my view, he is the one that deserves this chance at a big club, because if he wins, everyone will need to take an example from him and to change maybe their vision, also their view of how football is done. how matches get studied in Turkey, because if he could fight for the title with a club that was not with supporters, did not have the support of a real huge fan base, well, he can do great things for a club that has history, has fan base, has a culture of winning titles. But at the same time, he needs to cope with a fan base that have really the need of a title, which is different from Başakşehir. It has positives and negatives, we know. And well, what Abdullah Avci told me, I have some notes here I told you before, that here, he told me really interesting things, and we probably can start with his story, because his story began with the Turkish national team. He had some pressure, but just from the federation, because he started with the young teams of the federation. His career started in 2005 with a great campaign at the under 17 club of Turkey. So it's a completely different kind of coach from the one that we are used to in Turkey. So then he is a coach that is inspired by Pep Guardiola. He told me that in the last 10 years he watched all the matches of Pep Guardiola. So this is completely different from a coach that probably is Fatih Terim or I don't know, Senol Günes, for example. Beşiktaş will have to challenge Galatasaray once again, of course. So we have to look at Galatasaray and probably also at Fenerbahce in long-term perspective. I don't think Fenerbahce next season, but they will not have Europe, so they can be also an opponent. And also, who knows, Başakşehir, if they get an interesting new manager, they can also challenge for the title.
Slaven Bilic is being named, but also Okan Buruk, of course, his natural successor, as you pointed out last week on Football Turka.
I think, yes, Okan Buruk would be his natural successor. So also with Okan, that is going to be really interesting, because it would be the master against his kind of a student.
Apprentice, yeah. Master versus apprentice.
So yeah, master against apprenticeship. That's going to be really interesting if it happens. So, but in my vision, that would be like Beşiktaş and Başakşehir with the same football school against the old school. That is the one of Ersun Yanal, Fatih Terim, and well, of course, Senol Günes is not in the fight because he will be at the Turkish national team. But well, Fatih Terim is really. We are reading the same headlines. We are seeing the same kind of football, tactic, maktik, yok, bam, 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 which is not something that we could expect in 2019.
And that's probably as well why Galatasaray are not performing in Europe.
Exactly. That's also my opinion. So, well, I didn't see Abdullah Avci performing quite well in Europe, but that's probably also, I don't know, a diktat that he had at the club previously, because Başakşehir wanted to win the championship. That was the story they had to do.
It felt like a calculated risk. They, as long as they were in those qualifiers for the Champions League, they put forward great games. They knocked out Club Brugge. They did really well against Sevilla. But then the Europa League came, and they simply didn't really seem to care about it. They fielded a lot of reserves. A little disrespectful, in my opinion, because you do owe a certain amount of effort, I think, towards the nation, towards the coefficient. I mean, basically, Beşiktaş have been the only ones upholding that coefficient for the last couple of years, while other teams have apparently willingly sacrificed their coefficients in order to further their agenda in the National League, which is understandable, but I don't think you can get away with that at Beşiktaş. So he's going to need to learn to. If he comes, he's going to need to learn to cope with being active on multiple fronts. It's not just going to be focused on the league. Maybe the first season that would be tolerated because Senol Günes did it too the first season. But there will be higher expectations, obviously.
Well, of course, yes. But at the same time, I just found a note which is pretty interesting, because that's the kind of sentence that you would expect from Abdullah Avci at his first press conference. I will not know if he's going to be signed, if he's saying that when he's going to be signed. But, well, he told me 2 years ago that Vodafone Park was the most impressive stadium in which he had played as a coach, of course, or in which he had trained as a coach. Because he was explaining me the goal by Cengiz Ünder against Beşiktaş in that stadium. So that day I was interviewing Abci. I interviewed also Aldebayor, and he told me the same thing, that Vodafone Park is the most impressive stadium in which he had played in his career. So, and well, we are talking about also Abdullah Avci trained Başakşehir at, I don't know, Sanchez Pizjuan in Sevilla and other stadiums around Europe. Also in Turkey, that's the most impressive stadium in which he trained. So, well, that's a sentence that he will say probably at this press conference, and it will sound maybe, that kind of sentence that a new manager says to get the fans on his side. But, well, he said that 2 years ago.
Yeah, he said 2 years ago when there was no agenda, when there was nothing to be gained from those statements.
I guess, and that's quite interesting.
But how did he mean that? Did he mean it like in regards to the team, the fans getting behind the team, pushing them forward,
exactly, yes.
or just
that was really deafening also for the players, because he was trying to tell his players some things, but players that were on the other side of the pitch couldn't hear him at all, and also the ones that were close to him were quite in a difficult moment, when you have the fans pushing the team so hard. So it's difficult to talk with your players, which is something that we never think about. But, I don't know if some of our listeners of this podcast know, but if you play football, even if you play in a lower league, in a bad pitch or whatever, it's not so easy to hear your coach if you are on the other side of the pitch. Think about that when you have so many people and the whole stadium shouting and screaming the whole time. It's really, really difficult to communicate. And communication for Abdullah Avci is the most important thing. What matters most is the communication with the players. Here it's what he told me. And they also said that, we became number one at the time of the Turkey under 70, not just because we won, but because we had fun. That's really important. I think that probably this season of Başakşehir can be also explained in that sense, because we can say all the things we want about Başakşehir, but in the last months, starting from March, they were looking all of the things in the world, but not a team that had fun. So at Beşiktaş, we need to bring back this spirit, because this season was not like that. But, well, that is something fresh. I would like to see that at Beşiktaş, like a team that has fun, a team that has a tactical knowledge, that is following the example of somebody that is really thinking according to the game, that is following those rules, like having fun first, trying to have a philosophy that is different from the others, and then looking at the results. So, well, another thing is also the defense, because local media in Istanbul, they keep saying that Abdullah Avci is a defensive coach, which is something...
That's something he has disproven over the last 3 seasons, for sure. But that was definitely the case.
First season of Başakşehir was that, and the first season also at Istanbul Başakşehir was the same. So
for years, that was basically the style he played throughout his tenure there. Was defending first, and they were known as a lethal counter team. They had always had good, quick players. Doka, of course, in his prime, but of course also players like Ibrahim Akın. Those types of players that could really exploit the opponents on the counter. That's always something that they went for, and you even see it still now in the team. I mean, with Edin Visca, of course, who's been at the club for as long as well, and he basically groomed him. But Doka was still there 2 years ago. Mozoro, quick players that can hurt the team on the counter. But now we see also I found it very interesting when you said that his big example was Pep Guardiola, because he's been likened mainly to Diego Simeone is the coach that people liken him to. But when you saw at times when you saw Başakşehir play the last 2 years or so, or 3 years, like the first half in Vodafone against Beşiktaş, the combination football they were playing, that's not something you see too often from like a Simeone team. That's more a tiki-taka style type play, for sure. So you can see once those puzzle pieces start falling into place for Avci. That was always my big criticism, like years ago, from him. Like, he can play really well on the counter, he can organize his defensive team, but how will his teams do when they have a little bit more quality, but when they have the ball? And I think he's proven that they can do some really nice stuff and play some really good football. So please continue your story.
First of all, it's very important because I'm just finding also these notes. I'm not very, very orderly person, but well, I will try to learn on that. And then I found just this sentence on Pep Guardiola also. I watched all 10 matches in the last 10 years and what he tried to change in the game. Because Pep thinks according to the game. He has his rules and he likes to do everything according to those rules. This is why I like him the most of every other coach in the world. And the perception of what you do is important in every nation, but here in Turkey is most important of everything. What you do at the beginning of your experience, your first impression is what remains then, and people don't realize how much you can grow or develop a team or your football. This is very important. This is what we were talking about, but basically that's what he said. I'm just trying to retranslate it from Italian because I retranslate this, but I need to find the original.
A quick question, Bruno. When you spoke to him, what language was that in?
It was in Turkish, and I had a translator.
Okay.
Was translating everything in English, and now I have the scripts in Italian.
So did you by any chance ask him how many languages does he speak? How does he communicate with his players? Does he need a translator?
His secret is a man called Barbaros Gosnelli. Everyone can also follow him on Twitter because he's a translator that speaks, I think, 6 or 7 languages. If I'm not mistaken, probably he would be a great person to talk with also in some of these podcasts because he's really a character.
That would be interesting for sure. Yeah.
He's on Twitter, he's on Instagram, and he's really interesting. He travels a lot. When he has a couple of days off, he goes to probably Bulgaria or Poland or whatever to watch football matches and gets football shirts. And so he's a really football fan, first of all, but then he's really into the team. And
he's part of the staff.
So I think that if Abdullah Avci is moving to Beşiktaş, he could bring also Barbaros Gosnelli with him because he's just one of these secrets. Because communication is really important. As I told before, it's one of the most important things for him and as a coach. So, I think that having a translator that speaks so many languages and translates so well, also what Abdullah Avci wants, because we saw players like, apart from Edin Visca that speaks Turkish, there are players like
Adebayor,
Kaysara, that are foreigners and they really play exactly 100% as he wants. So, much of this has to be also considered, that has to be reflected by the words of the translator, because he has done an amazing job, I think.
A question, Bruno. If let's say Avci comes to Beşiktaş, do you think that he will be insistent on bringing certain players along, or trying at least to bring certain players? And if so, which players, if you had to pick 3, which would you think he would try and bring with him?
Well, first of all, I think he will try for Edin Visca, because he's absolutely the one that gave him so much as coach. So I would really, really put even money on that, because it's so obvious. Even though Visca was also rumored to go abroad, probably, I don't know. It's his last chance now.
Yeah, for sure. He's 28. He needs to make that move. I don't think he can stay at that club anymore. Well, he can, of course, but I mean, if I were him, and like in 20 years' time, and I would look back at my career, and to think that he spent like the prime of his career at such a club, like it's unfortunate, because he's the type of player that deserves to be loved by millions, by thousands at least. I mean,
but I think that for example, if Beşiktaş sells Quaresma, that looks really likely. You have a slot in that kind of position.
But Quaresma will go because that will never work in Abdullah Avci's
that's exactly
system.
The kind of player that will never work with him, I think. So, probably I'm wrong with that, but we don't know. But yeah, I think he's going, and he had a quite huge wage, if I can remember correctly. So, well, you can also spend some money to buy Visca, and then that would be also quite fine on a financial point of view, because Visca is not earning so much.
So which other players would you think he would try and bring?
Probably you would try also for Mosoro, because
really
Mosoro is
at his age, he's like 35.
Yeah, I think, but it's very important for the depth of the squad, because first of all, if he comes on free, of course, because we are talking about players that are coming on for free, because much of the money could be spent on Visca. So, well, you have also Adem Ljajic that can do that job, but the team to do well and progress in Europe needs to have players that needs to be as reserves. So, well, Mosoro is a possibility, but also thinking it wisely, Irfan Can Kahveci would be better.
Yeah.
And also, Beşiktaş would need to pay him a bit more, of course, but still, he's those kind of players, that needs to be brought at Beşiktaş probably. At the beginning, he could play as offensive midfielder, with probably Visca, on the right, then Ljajic on the left, and then in the middle you could put somebody like Irfan Can behind Burak Yilmaz for Beşiktaş, for example. Also, you can come as the match is going on 60 minutes. You need to play in Europe, you need to play Turkish Super League, so you have a lot of time in which you could deploy these kind of players. So, well, not Mosoro, but yes, Irfan Can Kahveci would be one to bring at Beşiktaş. Then I was saying the name before, or probably not, but yeah, Beşiktaş have Loris Karius as goalkeeper.
Yeah.
But one of the best goalkeepers in the league was also Mert, the goalkeeper of Başakşehir. So, well, Mert proved to be quite an interesting goalkeeper. He did an amazing performance also as against Galatasaray. I think that in order to spare some money, Beşiktaş could also sell Karius, and
they don't own him, so
yeah, sell
I think for me, if I would have to pick a Turkish keeper, it would be Gökhan Akan from Rizespor. I think he's
also Serkan from Konya, but I don't want my Konya.
No, not Serkan. He's not a big team material. He's the type of player that is good as long as he has a lot of work. But he that type of goalkeeper does not work for a team where he needs to make 2 or 3 saves in a match.
By the way, there are some Turkish goalkeepers that can do the job, I think.
Mind you, I don't know if Gökhan Akan is a goalkeeper either, because obviously he has only played at this level yet. But at least, but with Serkan, it's been tested, and it's not gonna happen.
By the way, well, we were discussing about goalkeepers, about midfielders, about also offensive players. But probably what Abdullah Avci wants to bring, as he told me, that defense makes you become champion.
Yeah.
So we probably need to look at the defense and what can he bring from Başakşehir, of course.
Kaytsara, maybe.
Kaytsara would be really an amazing buy. Of course, I think Başakşehir would make a bit of money from that, but yeah, he would be the kind of player. Also, I don't know the age of Epureanu, for example.
He's
and also if he's
32 or so.
Yeah. Because those kind of players were the ones that used to bring success to the club and to bring the club to a higher level, because we have to think that Başakşehir were not even Super League material before 4 years ago. So, well, he brought that club.
He has some stuff to work with there. He has Vida, who obviously I think he should be able to get a lot out of him, who's still in the prime of his career. And then, of course, there's Mirin, who it's going to be interesting to see what he can do with Mirin, if he can shape him into a really solid defender. Because look what he did with Atama. Atama was a player that nobody really rated a couple of years ago when he was a defensive midfielder, but he's been solid for the last 2 years playing for Başakşehir at the back.
So also we could see some interesting shifts, like for example, Atiba Hutchinson move to defense. I don't know, something like that we do not expect at all, but that could become quite interesting to watch. I would expect Oğuzhan Özyakup to be more present, because it was sidelined quite a lot
in the Emre role.
So also like players like Dorukhan, like Yalchin, for example,
Given
them quite a lot lately, but then Abdullah Avci quite works with young players, so they will be lucky to have him as coach. So, of course, we do not need to think as Beşiktaş with starting 11 players and stop, because he used to use like Başakşehir and just 11 players and then not so many players as backups. And one of the things that his critics usually use to say that Abdullah Avci is a loser, that he's not Beşiktaş material probably. But by the way, he will have to change that. Also, he changed that in the last season because the team did not have as much depth as it should have had. So I don't think, by the way, that he will bring, I don't know, Adebayor, Robinho, or those kind of players, because he doesn't need those names. Probably he didn't need those names as well, I think.
Do you think that he insisted on those players? For example, Dembaba, Robinho?
I think he did not insist on those players. Yeah. Because, when I talk about him, I talked a lot about Cengiz Ünder, because that's what Italian newspapers and magazines wanted at the time. So the discussion was much more about Cengiz Ünder and the time that he spent following him. That were 4 years that he spent following the player. So, I think that he still has a list of young players of Turkey that he wants to buy. So, for example, I would not be surprised if he comes to Beşiktaş and then, I don't know, Yusuf Yazıcı comes. Well, I hope for Yusuf that he goes to Europe. But
I think he is not within our means, let me put it that way.
Yeah, that's like quite exaggerated at the moment, but I don't know if he came last season, that could have been possible, but now it's quite too late. But those kind of players, like, I don't know, Abdülkadir Ömür, like Güç Tekin from Fenerbahçe, that is not a name that goes on the radars, but he's really something Super League material, and those players that get space at the young tournaments and are not big names just because they don't play in the Super League yet. I don't know, Atalay Babacan, Yunus Akgün. Of course, it's not easy to bring them from Galatasaray or Fenerbahçe, but those are the names that he could insist if he comes. And then also players from Altınordu. There are a few players from the setup of Altınordu that are playing at under 20 and under 17 right now. So we also could be surprised. Because,
or maybe not really.
Yeah, because I don't know, Beşiktaş is not easy to play so many youth players, and also in Başakşehir he didn't manage to do it in the last 2 years.
Yeah,
because the philosophy of the club was quite different. But when we were talking also about Clichy and Adebayor, he told me that he was the first to learn from them, not vice versa. They are not the one that learns things from Abdullah Avci. He was learning from them because he had never players like Adebayor and the stuff. He started as coach as under 17, so he was in Italy in 2005 with Turkey. Turkey had a very nice group. He will find Caner Erkin. He already had Caner Erkin in that group.
Volkan Babacan.
Yeah. Those kind of players. Like Volkan was a pretty sideline that would be really nice to understand what happened.
Arda, I think. Serdar.
Yeah. I think all that group that became. Well, Nuri Şahin was in that group, for example. Nuri Şahin.
No, Selçuk is older now.
Yeah. I read. Now there was Volkan Babacan, there was Caner Erkin, Nuri Şahin.
The guys from like 88, 89 generation. Mustafa Pektemek, perhaps.
Yeah. And it was interesting because they were parents of those players, especially Nuri. I can imagine that they told him that they didn't want those players to play for Germany, but they want them to play for Turkey. So because they had the chance, it was the double possibility at the moment. We see now at the moment there is one of the brightest stars at youth level. It's called Naci Univar. And he plays for Ajax. He's Dutch. He's also Turkish, and he has the double choice. He's playing for Netherlands at the moment, but you never know what happens in the future. So also those players, if you can get them, of course, Naci Univar is impossible now because he signed a professional contract with Ajax. But there are also lots of players in Germany here that can be considered because they, like for example, one was Malik Karamet, was already bought by Galatasaray, and he was Stuttgart player, and now he's playing, I think, for the Galatasaray youth setup, so it's not possible to get him. But those kind of names, many are not known yet probably, but they are like struggling here in Germany to find place, to find some, I don't know, some kind of
opportunity
and starting 11, then you can bring them to Beşiktaş. Like a current example is Givani Alci. So,
or Durukan, yeah. But let's focus on something else. For example, now we've spoken about maybe who he can bring, but what do you think of the players that are currently available to him? Who do you think will work under who would complement his philosophies, and who from the Beşiktaş squad maybe won't complement the philosophies and may have to look elsewhere for playing opportunities?
Well, first of all, I think that Beşiktaş will need to sell some players. This also was discussed in another Footballer Turca and also Black Eagles podcast, I believe. That was with Can Okar. I think the financial date here at Black Eagle podcasts, for many, many reasons, Beşiktaş needs to sell at least a couple of big names. So this is an opportunity for others, because you don't sell, for example, Miren, but you will sell Vida. So Miren will need to be a starting 11 player. We need to improve his game. We need to be to be fundamental and to play most of the games, I guess. And so he will be a key player, I guess. Another will be, I think, Oğuzhan, in my opinion, because if he will have more opportunities. He didn't shine the last year under Senol Günes, so I already said that. But, well, I expect Oğuzhan Osijek to be in the starting 11 and to be fundamental, as he should be for Beşiktaş, I think. Then, whoever comes as a right wing after Quaresma will be absolutely fundamental. So we will judge also Abdullah Avci on who will bring, because we don't know if he will manage to bring somebody like Edin Visca, for example, or somebody else that
might be tough. I mean, Başakşehir may want the capital price for him. May ask 10 million euros, and that's just something.
Rightly, it's on their. Of course, that they are in the position in which they should ask for a lot of money for him.
Yeah.
And also another key player will be Adem Ljajic, because he needs to be always starting. I also read that Kagawa is not staying, probably. So
we'll see. He posted something on Instagram, I believe, and people interpreted it as a goodbye, but it's not really clear, in my opinion. There's no wording like that, but we'll have to wait and see. I think, for me, I think Kagawa is somebody that could work well under Abci.
Quite well, I guess.
Because he could take that Mosoro role. He's a similar type player, for sure.
Quite better player.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Better, but similar. I mean, small, quick, intelligent, can score a goal, can change a match. Mosoro was that type of player when he was at Braga in his early years at Başakşehir too. I mean, he still is at times. I mean, he scored a couple of important goals this season as well. Ljajic is obviously 27, will be 28. He's the one player where Beşiktaş can build around, I think, right now. He's at that level, and the performance he showed this season, I mean, he's got 9 goals, 14 assists in 32 matches, so he's contributed to more than 23 goals in 32 games, and he didn't even start that much in the beginning, because Senol Günes did what he always does and eased him in slowly, which I think hampered his ability to adjust and to get going. I think if he would have just thrown him into the team straight away and just, made him important straight away, his statistics would probably even be more impressive. We probably would have gotten more points in the first half of the season, and who knows what could have happened. But that chapter is behind us now. But without a doubt, he will be important. I'm very curious to see how that would work, that dynamic between Laic and Avci, because we've heard some stories of Laic, of him being an enfant terrible, but I think he's been one of the more model professionals this season for Beşiktaş, always giving 100%. And
that also in the last 2 years at Torino, I think he had no problems at all. So, that's something for me. It's really, really old days. Fiorentina, we all remember, like, when he had a real riot, unbelievable, with Delio Rossi. They were punching each other. So basically, that was incredible.
Crazy.
Watch. I don't think there was anything similar, even for the craziness of Italian football, that is not comparable to Turkish football, but, you see things that are not easy to tell sometimes. So, that's pretty interesting. I think Laic is in his prime now. So, Beşiktaş needs to get the most from him. I'm having also some kind of discussions with friends that support Beşiktaş, because I found a hardcore Beşiktaş fan even at work. So,
did you?
Yeah, so that's normal in Germany. To be in such situations. So, he's telling me that Laic is the best player in the league. And,
one
I
of the best,
think
for
so
sure.
at the moment. But maybe in the next years, and also next year, will be very important, because he can prove me wrong. And
I think this season Edin Visca is above everyone else. You cannot.
So that is also my opinion. That Edin was really, really amazing, and
Figuli was
hope that
great.
he comes under Abci, because we would be sure that at Beşiktaş he will play as he played for Başakşehir, at least for a couple of seasons or 3 seasons. That would be absolutely win-win. Both
could you see him go
out for Başakşehir, the best player?
Could you see him go somewhere else? Could you see, for example, Visca go to Fenerbahce or to Galatasaray, or do you think he will want to follow his mentor?
Well, I remember from an old interview from my old magazine that my Bosnian colleague had a chance to talk with Visca, and Visca rates Abdullah Avci really, really highly. So if he has the chance, he will follow his mentor.
Interesting.
By the way, also it's the last chance for Edin Visca to get a big offer.
I think this is the moment for him.
I always remember also the words of some agents, some players, managers that always say, you can talk as much as you can, but at the same time, players follow the money. That's also true on one hand, but on the other hand, that will be also interesting to see Fenerbahce with Edin Visca and Miha Zajc and other players up front, because Fenerbahce will be undergoing a revolution, and that would be also interesting to watch. They would be probably quite dangerous on a long-term perspective, but for the next season, if he stays in Turkey, I would really, really be interested to see Edin Visca under Abdullah Avci in another context. So, but I would think that if an offer from I don't know, La Liga or Italy comes, Edin Visca would go straight away, and that's also the best for him, because in 2 seasons he could come back to Turkey anyway and
for sure
go to Beşiktaş or Fenerbahce, even if he doesn't find place in Sevilla or whatever. I just say Sevilla because
Sevilla would be a good team. That's a team where he would fit perfectly, I think.
That's something that comes. He was like on Monchi's radar, so it's really possible that he goes to Sevilla. Because Monchi, when he was following Edin Visca, then he watches some Başakşehir match, and then he came back to Roma with Cengiz Ünder. So that's one of the reasons that's quite known in Italy, that it happened that way. So, now Monchi is back to Sevilla, so Visca is still one of those names you could watch for. And so this is one of the names, but it's quite expensive. So maybe we're gonna be surprised, because in the order to see a better Turkish football, we would all need to hope for Abci's success at Beşiktaş. I'm not even a Beşiktaş fan, even though I'm a guest here at this podcast, but I would hope so, because that would mean that the whole Turkish football would need to rethink
the way things are going right now. Because now to success, you just need a strong coach like the Senol Günes or Fatih Terim, and no tactics, and let's go on the pitch.
Well, let's be
like
honest. I mean, Beşiktaş performed really well in the Champions League and in Europe under Güneş, so there were clearly tactics there. I think the problem with Güneş...
there is no that kind of study.
Yes, yeah. Like Abdullah Avci studies his opponents, and I think that's the thing. Senol Güneş did that in Europe too. I think he studied the opponents in the Champions League. I think he studied the opponents he respected. I think he didn't do it for everyone, though. I think in the Europa...
He didn't do it for Dynamo Kiev. I know that game was not a football game at all. But anyway, the first 10 minutes or 20 minutes, you're always deploying the same 4-2-3-1. Yeah. There is no change if you're facing somebody else.
Tactically, he has shown a couple of brilliant strokes of brilliance, but there was luck involved. I mean, Napoli away, luck involved.
Yeah, against Napoli, it was against Maurizio Sarri. We don't have to forget that, for example. When he was playing Maurizio Sarri, when he was playing, for example, Conceição at Porto, or Leipzig, that was even...
Porto was probably a great example where there was really good preparation, where he had figured out the opponent. But that's something we don't see a lot with him in the league, because in the league he always has this attitude of, we are Beşiktaş, they have to adjust to us, we don't adjust to them. That's why every single time he played Başakşehir, almost every single time he got schooled, because he was arrogant. Because he was arrogant. Yeah, and that's something I've heckled for months, and I think it's the thing you're never gonna get that with Avci. Avci is always going to study the opponent and is going to prepare to the best of his ability, whether that works out or not. Look, we saw now against Galatasaray how that didn't work out. Which the reasons were, we will never know. The same thing against Beşiktaş. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But a coach and a team who are well prepared always have more of a chance of getting a good result in the end than a team that just goes in it and wings it.
And also it brings a new school, a new approach to the whole of Turkish football, which is something really important, because Okan Buruk comes from the same school because he was his vice coach. So basically, it's something similar. He had a great season in Rize, and now I would really like to see him at Başakşehir. When I was arriving in his office, it's crazy because he has like a board, a football board, tactical board, like he as the face of the players, and he tries every time to move in spite of the opponents' tactics and whatever. So he's really studying that much. It's really, really impressive to see it firsthand. It's really impressive to see all that. And he had a kind of report on his desk. He tried to hide me that report because it was a report on Akhisar. He was playing Akhisar next Sunday. So even when he was playing Akhisar, he had that kind of report, and he said that he was worried because he was playing Okan Buruk, and because Okan Buruk was his vice coach. So
was that the game they lost with the Çikaleşi goal?
Yeah, and he won that 2-1 at home, I think. But he really struggled for that. He won at 9th minute, I guess. So with the Emre goal, if I don't remember wrongly. But by the way, he was really worried about that. And if you are worried about Akhisar, you can imagine that when he will be playing Europa League football in a group stage, he will be really focused on that, because it's really, he didn't do well in Europe because I think the input coming from the from the CEO, from the probably board of the club, was to bring home this title, this championship, and make history.
So clearly, from everything you're telling us, is his staff is really important. He has people...
so it's really important that he brings the whole staff, not just he is the top. The cherry on the cake.
And a very interesting news bit on that, which just came out while we are recording, is that Guti has left Beşiktaş. So that makes sense. If Abdullah Avci is to come, he will want to bring his own staff and his entire staff, because I recently saw an interview with Philippe Clement, the coach of Racing Genk, who, of course, the team that beat us in the Europa League this season, 1-4 at Vodafone Park. And he had some really nice things to say, by the way, about that match and about our fans. And he said, but that's not that important for this topic. But I'm going to mention it anyway because it was about Beşiktaş. He said the 1-4 away to Beşiktaş, that was like one of the biggest reference points of the season for them because it gave them the confidence going forward that they could get something done. That was probably the best game they played all season. Was also noted by some other people there. And he did say that I've never in my entire life witnessed anything like at the end of the game when the match was over, the entire stadium stood up and applauded my players. That's something I've never seen ever before. And he was very respectful about Beşiktaş and all that, which I think just shines brilliantly on him. But a point that I was going to make is he also made that point of how important that preparing for a match, studying the opponent, analyzing the opponent, getting those reports, but also watching games yourself. So he has people who study the opponent, scout the opponent, get him the scouting reports and everything like that. But he also takes the time to watch the games himself to see certain things that maybe his scouts missed or something he sees differently. And that's the type of thing that I think Abdullah Avci does too, and that's something that I don't think Senol Günes did as religiously.
Yeah, we have I'm just finding on other notes, a team of 15 people working for him, which is an exception for Turkey. It's not like you don't have such a big scouting team there. It's not just scouting. There are like scouting team, the translator, the coaches also, because he's not the only coach. There are also other staff, other trainers and people that study the opponents for him. And also this is very important because this can be quite interesting for Beşiktaş as the first thing you are going to see as Abci will come, like defense makes you defend the champion. For the first year, you have to build a structure and you have to start from there. So from the defense and defensive phase. Then we changed, adding more duties to our players.
Just to be clear, these are Avci's words, not Bruno's.
So,
just making that clear for the listeners because.
Then he said also, in our team the quality became higher because also there were many new players like Adebayor and whatever because he started from Mehmet Battal and then today's Başakşehir is quite different. Then he told me also, it's really important and it became important to work with different bases and offensive options, focusing also on our opponents, not just on us. So this is really basically what we were talking about all the time. That's really interesting to watch it. I'm pro Abdullah Avci for this reason. I know also the critics because this season and the last season Başakşehir completely choked in March or April in the last part of the season. Yeah. So
even the season before they beat Beşiktaş 3-1 and it's back in their own hands almost, and then they choked afterwards. So the big game, they showed up, they won that, they took Beşiktaş by storm. That was the game. They came 3-0 up, and Beşiktaş pulled one back in the end with Dembaba. But that was, if Beşiktaş had won that match, the gap would have been 7 points, I think, or something, and it would have been over. But they completely outclassed Güneş and his men and took that game. But then afterwards, they also choked.
Yeah. So, as we can see, it's a bit interesting because it's a new thing.
That's always going to be the biggest source of criticism and the biggest source of doubt I think Beşiktaş fans will have.
But that's Avci. In a kind of I have a comparison. Of course, we can think at Juventus that are fighting Massimiliano Allegri in spite of 5 titles won because they want to add a new philosophy to the club, a different playing style and a different view, also a different vision, starting from the coach because they lost against Ajax and they saw that you also need to play well and to have your own philosophy to have success in Europe. So basically what Beşiktaş are doing in a lower scale, of course, it's if they sign Abci, of course, it's to have a different vision for the club because you don't sign Abci to win the league. At least, of course, they do this for that. But you sign Abci also to change how things are run.
To not just be Galatasaray, carbon copy of Galatasaray or Fenerbahce. You want to be different. You want to set yourself apart, and you want to, like you said, have your own identity, have your own playing style. And
you could have signed Mustafa Denizli once again, and
exactly.
And tried it once
or
again.
Lucescu.
Or Lucescu. Lucescu would have been like the sure option. You do the normal stuff. It's like. I would have been quite interested by Guti, for example, as coach.
Yeah.
Because that would have been completely fresh and quite unknown, but it's maybe too fresh and too unknown.
The big question is going to be how much is Avci going to be allowed to change at the club? How much of the structure of the club, how much influence is he going to have on the youth setup, for example? Because obviously I think at Başakşehir, he was basically the director of football. He wasn't just a coach.
He was that kind of coach, so he was also following the youth setup. He built the youth setup of Başakşehir because they did not have anything. This is the reason why he stayed also 4 years. That is also because or also maybe 5 years, because they needed to build from scratch a new youth system. And now they also produce their own players, but they didn't have any youth team because they didn't have a team. So Beşiktaş will have to improve that, because the youth setup of Beşiktaş, do not produce like the same number of players that the Galatasaray are building right now, because Galatasaray have really an amazing youth sector that has to be said. At the moment, they are producing much many players than anyone else in Turkey. Fenerbahce are quite well on that. Then we are not talking about how many chances those players get, but we are talking about Ozan Kabak did have the chance, but for example, Yunus Akgün doesn't have the chance to shine as he would deserve, for example. So, but this is a different kind of talk.
First of all, the same thing at Beşiktaş though. Our youth team does well in the youth ranks. We had, I think, our under 15, 16, and 17 became champions, I think. But it's the same story, really. Our players don't really get the opportunities. We have some of those youth players that are getting chances elsewhere. For example, Sedat, I forgot his last name, Şahin Türk. He's playing in second division on loan with Balıkesir Spor, and he's been doing well there for 2 seasons. But those are the type of players, they don't really get opportunities at Beşiktaş. The only youth player is a 28-year-old Necip Uysal, who is the bane of my existence. But it's that's just definitely something that needs to be improved.
Well,
I think
it's a name actually, Orkan Çınar.
Yeah, but he has attitude issues too, and he's not a youth player.
Not anymore, of course. But for example, next season, what kind of contract he has for Beşiktaş?
He has a long-term contract, so he's still under contract. Yeah.
Yeah, so it could be one of those.
Yeah,
players.
possibly. But that's also one of those things that we see under Avci is a lot of those Turkish players, like for example, an Irfan Can. Who could have been one of those many names that's, talented but attitude issue, whatever. But you see that he gets the best out of those players. So hopefully, I think that when you get someone like Avci, you need to be prepared to give him the key to the castle, and you need to let him do his thing. You don't just bring him to be the coach of the first team. You bring him to change the structure of your club and for the long term. Abdullah Avci is not a 2-season coach.
He's a kind of coach that wants to build.
Yeah, he wants to be the Arsène Wenger or the Sir Alex Ferguson of his club, so to speak. Hopefully,
so
Sir Alex.
Practically, he's a legend of Başakşehir. Of course, that Başakşehir didn't have a story with other coaches, but that wouldn't be completely strange to see, like. The new stadium of Başakşehir renamed after Abdullah Avci this season, because
that would be. I mean, what do they have? What do they have with Fatih Terim? That doesn't make sense that their stadium is called after Fatih Terim. Like, I would be completely understanding if Galatasaray renamed their stadium to the Fatih Terim Arena or Park or whatever. That would make sense,
But now probably they will do it later in the years, I guess, for Galatasaray. But Başakşehir is really, that was crazy because they wanted, I don't know what was the reason behind that, but the fans, the only fans they have, the Başakşehirler 1453, which is the year of the Ottoman conquest of Istanbul, if I'm not mistaken.
1453, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's that kind of group, but that's the only ultras group they have.
Yeah,
so even though there are a few people, the club will need to listen to them. So this is also quite important and interesting because maybe they will lose the title next year against Abdullah Avci at Abdullah Avci Stadium, and then they will want to change the name once again. But this is really, really.
Don't you think it had more to do with the disrespect that Fatih Terim showed as well on the sideline, assaulting
I think
staff member and stuff like that? I mean,
that Abdullah Avci is a legend of the club of Başakşehir, and he will always be a legend.
Yeah, he's not.
He would never. Yeah,
he would never do that. You know, just like Senol Günes wouldn't do that. Fatih Terim is a very polarizing figure. Love him or hate him, you know.
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, he's been extremely successful, but some of his methods are questionable.
Well, it's like the old Turkish football that we love and hate at the same time. But yeah, we really, really hope that this kind of really good old Turkish football will sometime be put, in the closet, and then we can move on to something new, a new age of new coaches that are prepared, that are something that can.
That's the paradigm shift that Turkish football needs. We've seen that.
Also, for the
countries.
national team is important because for the moment, Senol Günes is the best option, in my opinion.
But he is also still the old generation, the old guard, the old way of thinking.
He arrived in third place in 2002. So, Turkish football is still stuck as it was 20 years ago. In that kind of golden age of Turkish football, we are still there. So, if we want to move on, I'm saying we, even though I'm not Turkish at all, but I'm definitely in this game from too much time, and so I really hope for Turkey and for Turkish football that this is the dawn of a new era, because really this is very important to express this many times.
But there are some new coaches coming up, and like for example, like you said, Okan Buruk is one of those, and maybe he can be the next big Galatasaray coach, for example. Obviously, he has connections to that club. He also has connections to Beşiktaş, so he could be the next Beşiktaş coach too. I mean, but obviously, it looks like Beşiktaş are going to go for Abdullah Avci. That's clear. Fikret Orman has had a relationship with Abci and has been building that relationship for a couple of years. I think it's been clear that he might be the next in line. It was just a question.
I would like to see as coach in a long-term perspective. Of course, he's Emre Belözoğlu. I don't know if he wants to do that, of course.
Yeah, maybe at Fenerbahce, not at Beşiktaş.
I just for Turkish football, speaking-wise, of course, for the Beşiktaş, it will never be possible. But for Turkish football, that would be interesting because he has an incredible knowledge. I was also impressed by the knowledge he has of football. So that would also be quite interesting to see him, even though I would not be impressed even if he tries to be the new Turkish Football Federation president. Also on a long-term perspective, because he has a bit of knowledge. I would like to see also a president of the federation that has
no ties.
Knowledge, like, Altintop, for example. Would be a nice name, but that's not happening, right?
I think the problem there's going to be an agenda with the government getting involved, trying to get their will. We want the foreign limits up. I want to see somebody who operates the federation separately from anything else. And
I would like, somebody that takes the ball also.
That's how it should be. That's how it has to be as well, according to UEFA. There should be no government interference, but obviously it's Turkey.
Well, I don't want to talk about my beloved Italy, but the president of the federation in Italy is Gabriele Gravina, that was involved in a match-fixing scandal, that he's a politician,
that he also was involved in a drug smuggling scandal in the 90s, in a prostitution scandal, I believe, also.
Sounds like
in orgies,
fun.
Every country has this problem. Every probably Mediterranean country has this kind of problem.
I was just gonna say, I don't have anything like that here in Belgium, I can tell you.
yeah. But basically, I would like to see Alessandro Del Piero as president of the Italian Football Federation, because he would be really better. Really, I don't know. He has kicked the ball. He is a world champion. He knows how things work. He can do that job, but no, because he doesn't have, I don't know, the connection with politics, with those TV rights selling and whatever. I shouldn't talk about so much about those TV rights stuff, because there could be,
but
I don't know.
But let's talk about Abdullah Avci some more before we end it. But a big question that I think one more big point of contention or one more big source of criticism is, of course, his unsuccessful tenure as head coach of Turkey. What do you think is the main reason behind that not ending in a success?
Well, yeah, that was not a success story, of course, because even though I was not deeply into Turkish football as I would have become later, that was appearing one of the worst sides of Turkey, I believe, in the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years. Well, probably, yes. I don't know, Eating probably was worse, but, well, that was a failure, of course. No excuses for that. And that's, I don't know what happens, honestly. It's really a kind of black hole in the career of Abdullah Avci, because elsewhere he has always done a great job. Even in Turkey's youth setup, when he was coach of the under-17 team, he brought them to a semi-final and then to the World Cup, which is not easy to do that. No, he won the championship in Europe, and then he brought them to the World Cup, and he was also quite successful there. So, well, that's amazing how things turn out to be not good. I think that probably that group was divided in many different groups, for example. That's something that was also a bit said with Fatih Terim when he was coach of the Turkish national team, that there is a group that speaks German, a group that speaks Turkish, and they are not completely all together. But I don't know which is the truth. I should go to the dressing room and see, what happens there. Because it's not easy also to build so much when you don't have the tactical, I don't know, time to build something. He's not the kind of coach for a national team, in my opinion, because he needs time to build a group, scratches, and you can't build a group if it comes to you for 2 weeks and then it leaves. You don't have the time to do that. It's better probably Senol Günes or somebody like him that has a straight approach. He has also a tactical preparation, but just something really basic, like, okay, you do well this match, and then I say goodbye to you and see you in 3 months. It's not easy to do the coach of the national team, because you're not a coach.
Sure.
You are. You should be good in selecting the players, and maybe not so good at coaching the team. Abdullah Avci is really good at coaching. You have the time to do that for the under-17 because you have more stages and more, and also the group is more united because there are young players that are more focused on doing well, more focused on being tactically ready to new setups. Like if you play 4-4-2 and then you play 4-3-3, you're ready to do that in 2 different matches. If you are 16 years old, of course. If you are Arda Turan and you are already a star, you don't want to do that to play and sacrifice yourself in the defense, because you have this national team coach that says that, why should I defend against, I don't know, Estonia or whatever? I'm Arda Turan, I'm the star, he doesn't let me play so much, so why should I do that? I don't know. And also the group apparently was quite divided in many different ways that I don't imagine, because also that was the same group that he had as under-17 coach, probably the old I don't know, part of the group was against this kind of part of the group that was with him, because of course his players like Wolfgang Babachan, John Erkin, Nuri Sahin were with him, because they were his players. I don't know, I can just imagine, because I was not there. So sometimes those things happen in national teams. That was also happening with Italy when they failed to clinch place at the Russia World Cup last year. The group was so divided. So also Ventura was not a bad coach after all, because he did well at Bari Torino, but he was not a coach for the national team, because he could not be somebody that selects players and then sees them for 2 weeks.
Yeah, not everyone is cut out for that job, for sure. But Buddha, do you still have any other interesting notes, perhaps, from your meeting with Avci that you want to talk about?
Yeah, probably. Well, there is something also, I don't know, something that he told me about when he made a start Cengiz in there at the team. The first time he played against Fenerbahce at the beginning of the league, and Cengiz also scored, if I remember correctly, because he told me that's a risky situation in Turkey, this one, because if the guy doesn't play well immediately, he will not play anymore. He was 70 years old, and the board was quite worried about the thing, but they said no, he has to play. If I make him to play now, he will be faster to learn. This is what he told me. So basically, he had the power to say to the board, well, now he has to play, I make him play, and then he will be faster. And so it was. But will he have the same, I don't know, the same kind of power at Beşiktaş? This is really interesting to say, because also you have those discussions and inside the club always, I guess. But maybe even Senol Günes tried that kind of approach with this board, but it didn't work so many times. So, well, aside from all the things he told me about Cengiz in there and the communication with the players, that's quite interesting. So, also some of his old players of his team in 2005, the team that went into Italy that won the Euro under 17, some are also working with him right now. It would be interesting to see who are those former players that are working with him right now. I don't know them, but still. And then would really nice to see a duel against Okan Buruk, his apprentice, because he really told me many times that Okan is a good coach in the making. So, well, that's all, I think. Defense, and then, well, much of the things is of course on Cengiz, because that was the interview basically, but and also, well, on the relationship between him and Emre, we will see back Emre at Fenerbahce, I guess, right? So this is the news.
This looks like that's what it's going to be, yeah. So it's.
So it is not related to Beşiktaş, of course, because we don't care if he has a great relationship with Emre, but also because, by the way, he will never come to Beşiktaş. So
no, of course not. I mean, it's too late in his career, and he's
going to want to end
it.
Yeah.
He wants to end his career at Fenerbahce, of course, which should be respected, I think.
Yeah.
But there is maybe some other players that he may want to bring, but that may not be possible because of financial constraints. Obviously, Edin Visca, I think he would want to bring him. I think Edin Visca would be very willing, probably as well. But the question is, would Beşiktaş be able or willing or able to fork out the transfer fee? Look, I think if Başakşehir were willing to play ball and charge 4, 5, maybe maximum 6 million, I could see that perhaps being worked out. But anything more than that, I that's not going to happen. Beşiktaş are not the type of club to spend 10 million euros on a domestic player, or on any player for that matter, especially not a domestic player.
Because if you think about that, it's not even on a financial fair play view, it's not the fee that is so huge on the club's financial accounts, it's the wage. If the wage of Edin Visca is not so high, it's really better to spend 12 million like Galatasaray did for Diagne. You spend 12 million, but then you spend 1 million for a year. It's better than spend, I don't know, 5 million per year for Negredo. That becomes a huge financial weight.
That's true, but that was a position where the club was forced into due to financial fair play because they couldn't afford a 10 million or so transfer fee and a wage. You spread the wage out over those years, but the transfer fee, that's something they need to pay straight away, and that's something they simply couldn't do. So maybe now that they are no longer under financial fair play settlement, we will see Beşiktaş spend a little bit more. But they still have Laiç, who they have to pay 6.5 million for. That's going to be their big money transfer of the summer. I don't think Beşiktaş are going to be making 2-3 of those types of signings.
Well, it depends if you sell somebody like Vida, for example. Vida could have been sold last summer for a big amount.
Yeah, possibly, but that's the type of thing. Vida, we waited last summer too. I think there needs to be clarity soon. I think they need to decide who's going to go, who's going to leave. The more I see, the more I think Vida is probably going to stick around. I think there's going to be, Adriano obviously is already gone. Tolga, Mustafa Pektemek, they are gone. Quaresma still has a year of contract, but he will probably be sent out to pasture. So there's going to be a lot of players that are going to be leaving this summer. There's not going to be a lot of money coming in terms of transfer fees. Beşiktaş just simply don't have a lot of players that are worth anything right now, I think.
But I also see like Fenerbahce are trying to sign Max Kruse from Werder Bremen, which is quite a low wage kind of transfer if it's coming. Also, of course, Kruse is going to Turkey for a better wage, but a Turkish club can offer him a better wage, even paying him 2 million instead of 1 million. So it's like, I don't know if the figures are right, of course, but those are the kind of transfer that the club has to do, of course, right now. Kruse is not a role because, that's Burak Yilmaz and whatever. But
then you're looking again at...
They also bought Zayt from Empoli.
Yeah, and that's a more remarkable thing.
Yeah, that's remarkable because it's a long term. Those clubs in Turkey needs to change transfer policy. It's a long talk, of course.
Yeah, but the type of Max Kruse transfer is just another one of the typical Turkish transfer. A 30-plus-year-old player, lure him with money. That's no different, and obviously is not as expensive as.
It depends of course, on how much money you're gonna put on.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
but it's not.
Negredo was the beginning of something that was not really so healthy for Beşiktaş. So.
But it's not the picture that was being painted at the start of last season when Fenerbahce were buying a lot of young, talented players. Where this massive paradigm shift and they're putting the youth forward and in the spotlight. But in reality, none of those players got playing time.
Yeah, because they did not have playing time and they didn't even shine. Also, some like Black Ealges didn't play as well. So
he played early on. He played good, and then he didn't play anymore, and he got loaned out, and he didn't play at all.
Well, that would be a name that I would try if I was, I don't know, in the board of Beşiktaş, because Fenerbahce don't know what to do with him. So you can buy him, and then for a little fee, like I don't know, Fenerbahce are not like be super. Strain on him. I don't know. It could be possible to buy him and then play him, give him a chance because Abdullah Avci has this kind of, understanding on youth players. So, well, I hope so. I hope those kind of players get their playing time because I don't know. I don't trust so much Ersun Yanal. I see him as a coach of the old school still. So for Fenerbahce, maybe they will be happy because they will be back to Europe next year, of course. But still,
he's not the type of coach to transform that club into a model.
Yeah, it's not. This is why also Ali Koç didn't want to hire him for a long time.
They probably should have tried for Abdullah Avci, for example, or Okan Buruk, but obviously Okan Buruk is not.
Okan Buruk is not possible for Fenerbahce for
controversial.
Those reasons. So Avci could have been tried, of course. But
for sure.
Now it's too late, probably.
Yeah, but let's see. Maybe he becomes the next Beşiktaş coach. It looks like that's going to be the case, but obviously no official word yet. But I think unless Başakşehir block it and refuse to work along, but I don't. It looks like it's gonna happen.
Well, if he is keen on going, Başakşehir are not resisting because, okay, of course, he's like your legend and you want to keep him, but it's not possible to force somebody. It's kidnapping somebody. It's not like.
But obviously, he just signed a 5-year new contract, so they could insist on a buyout for that contract, which could be problematic. But I don't know. I don't think that we've never really seen a huge issue when a coach really wants to go somewhere. Now, quickly, your personal opinion. Do you think this is something he wants himself?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question for lack of my internet connection.
Do you think that this move is something that Abdullah Avci wants himself?
I think so. Yes.
Is that something you talked about with him when you did you?
No. I didn't have the chance to ask him about Beşiktaş because even though
no, but just in general, like if that was his ambition.
I think he wanted to build something that lasts at Başakşehir. I also think that he wanted to win something. But if he leaves now, it means that he understands that it's not possible with this group to go further, to go beyond what he has already achieved, which is, I repeat, it's massive. Because you, like he's not Football Manager or FIFA, the game in which you can win, you can take, a random club, buy him, and then win a league.
It's like going into La Liga, taking Getafe and almost winning the
reality
league.
Is completely different. It's difficult to have a bunch of players and to bring them from scratch to win a league like
to build a fan base, because that's something that club tried but just couldn't.
Yeah, it's a positive thing to not to have a fan base, but it's also negative because when you are in a difficult moments, you don't have anyone to push you when you are down 2-0 against Göztepe at home. And you could score 3 goals, but if you don't have 50k people screaming at you, like it happened for Galatasaray when they were 0-0 against Akhisar, for 90 minutes they were really sucking bad at that game, and then Mitroglou comes out and scores and the whole stadium erupts. That's something that also Beşiktaş fans know. Those moments are the moments that decide the league at the end.
When you spoke,
moments in which you have the fans on your side, that it changes a lot, I believe.
Before, when you mentioned speaking to him about, when he mentioned that Vodafone Park was the most impressive stadium he's ever been at and stuff like that, did you speak about the lack of that at Başakşehir? Was it something that was discussed, or did you?
I discussed that with the board of the club, not with him, but with the board of the club. They were telling me about the programs they have, like, if you are a kid and you grow up in Başakşehir, you have free tickets. Of course, that is also here in Munich, I discovered. If you are young and you can go in at Munich 60, the club that is not Bayern, the other club.
1860.
1860 is the real club of Munich, of course, but this is partial, of course, by many sides. And it's coming also, there are teachers that are there. There is a kind of a school part of the stadium inside. I didn't know that. In which there are teachers, you can also do things, play with other kids. And it's like a small school there. And also because, at halftime during the matches, you can also, if you want, the kid is not interested in football, you can bring there, leave him here and watch the match and then get him back home and leave, which is quite strange also. Or you can bring the kid to the game and make him play with other kids there. It's quite strange as philosophy, but they are trying also to do some things to bring fans that are delusional with Fenerbahce, Galatasaray and Beşiktaş, and they're giving me free entry if you eat at the Burger King, which is outside the stadium. Well, they are quite desperate, in my opinion, to get fans because they need a fan base. But the numbers are low, of course, if you watch it then by that perspective, but they are rising in the last years because they were 200 and now they are 2,000 as average, but they're aiming at 8,000 average of people in the last years.
That's not going to
next
happen.
years, that's possible because Başakşehir is really huge as a district. Something that's really not told. It's quite huge. It's like it's big as Bergamo, my hometown, which is weird if you think about that. The problem is that the tradition, you can't force somebody that is 40 years old or 50 years old and that has already been a Fenerbahce or Beşiktaş fan. I read some interviews by my old colleague, great colleague, Samantha Johnson at TRT World. She interviewing people outside the stadium at last match day, and there was a Fenerbahce fan, and he said, okay, it take me 4 hours to go to Kadıköy to watch Fenerbahce. I was pissed off with them, and so I became a Başakşehir fan because it's the side of my house, so now it's part of my neighborhood, part of my being as Başakşehir citizen. So it's interesting. If on a long term they want to work with the children, because they are the only fans they can gather right now as first fans. That's really important for them because, if you become Başakşehir fan and you are 10-year-old, it's still possible that you don't change the club later.
That's true. And it's going to be interesting to see in maybe a couple of years down the road if they're going to be able to increase that capacity. But much is going to depend on how the club continues to evolve. I mean, if Başakşehir now lose Abdullah Avci, the captain of their ship, if they lose Emre Belözoğlu, the captain of their team, maybe Edin Visca, who knows? I think they're also the team that they have right now. They have an old team.
They have the problem because losing Visca would not be so bad if you cash in, of course, like they cashed in for Cengiz Ünder. But the problem after selling Cengiz Ünder is that he didn't buy, for example, Barış Aleci or 3 or 4 players from.
But they're never gonna get what they got for Cengiz as they got for Edin Visca, simply because Visca is unproven at the highest level, and he's already 28.
Yeah, that's a problem.
So if they can get close to 10 million for him, that's gonna be a lot, I think. But I want to thank you very much, Bruno, for coming on and giving people some insight on Abdullah Avci. I think for those of you who listen to this interview, I think you will probably have learned a lot of stuff that you probably did not already know about Abdullah Avci. We of course know that he is a capable coach, but of course, he's been our opponent, so we've been trying to see the flaws in his play, but now he's going to probably be our coach, and let's try and see the positives. And he's definitely one of the best candidates out there right now for Beşiktaş, for any Turkish team probably. And Bruno, I want to thank you very much for giving us your expertise and sharing your experience, your notes about from your interview on Abdullah Avci, and it's been extremely informative.
Thanks a lot to you also, because I also forgot some stuff I I gathered around Turkey. So now it's interesting to see them back and to remember also those moments, because he was one of the coaches that impressed me the most, to be honest. So that's natural.
Hey, be sure to put those away, compile them in a map, and so you never misplace them again.
Yeah, I was not so impressed by America, to be honest. So, even though it's